The captain's final flight, a reckoning in the sky. Wait. Before the ride of your life begins, I need you to do two things. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Tell me in the comments, where are you tuning in from? Your engagement is the fuel for these stories. This is the tale of Victoria Sterling, a woman abandoned with 5 one-year-old babies, her quints. 8 years later, she resurfaces as the pilot of her ex-husband's private jet. The look on his face when he saw her was priceless, but the truth she delivered next was an earthquake that shifted their worlds forever. Get ready. This isn't just a story, it's a high-altitude lesson in karma. The story begins. Mayday. Mayday. Elite Air 447, turn back. Immediate deviation. Catastrophic icing conditions reported. The panicked voice of the air traffic controller crackled through Captain Victoria, Vicky Sterling's headset. She tightened her grip on the yoke, her eyes scanning the complex array of instruments in the Gulfstream GCX-50 cockpit. Outside, over the turbulent Pacific Northwest, a brutal storm was tearing through the upper atmosphere. Lightning illuminated her focused face, the sharp angles of her jaw betraying her intense concentration. Her co-pilot, Mark, a young man who looked permanently stressed, cast her a nervous glance. Vicky was the epitome of calm. At 38 years old, with a seasoned air that belied her years, she had built her reputation on unflappable control. But then, a sharp, entitled voice pierced the cockpit door intercom, demanding to know what the hell was going on. And then she heard that voice, emerging from the plush, state-of-the-art passenger cabin, demanding an explanation and obstructing emergency procedure, was Julian Thorne, the titan of Seattle real estate, the man who had vanished without a trace 8 years prior, leaving her to fend for herself with 5 newborn babies. Their eyes locked across the threshold of the cockpit. Julian, in his sharp Italian suit, looked exactly like the man on the cover of Pacific Business Quarterly, silver at the temples, radiating effortless wealth. The color drained from his face as the instant, visceral recognition hit him. "Return to your seat, Mr. Thorne, immediately. This is a critical safety situation," Vicky commanded, her voice cutting through the rising sound of the engines and the wind with the chilling precision of a sonic boom. Mark looked from the terrified VIP passenger to his captain, utterly bewildered by the sudden, electric tension. Vicky's dark brown eyes flickered momentarily to the custom platinum watch on her wrist, an anniversary gift from Ethan, before focusing back on the slick black limousine waiting on the tarmac far below. The jet landed with the butter-smooth precision that was Vicky's signature. Each movement she made was calculated, not just for the landing, but for the performance that was about to begin. She descended the steps after the passengers, a study in impeccable professionalism. The limousine door opened, and Julian Thorne emerged, his confident smile freezing the moment his eyes met hers. "Welcome aboard your private flight, Mr. Thorne," Vicky announced, her perfect, enunciated diction concealing the triumphant storm inside her. The shock in his eyes, the realization that this powerful, in-control pilot was the same desperate woman he had abandoned 8 years ago with 5 infants, was a flavor she allowed herself to savor for exactly 3 seconds. "I am Captain Victoria Sterling, and I will be responsible for your flight today." Julian visibly swallowed, searching her face for the young, frightened wife he'd left behind. His eyes dropped to the nameplate on her chest. Sterling Vance. The added surname, one that hadn't existed when he'd known her, struck him like a physical blow. "Is there a problem, sir?" Vicky asked, her cordiality a thin shield over the chaos in her soul. "No," he managed, regaining a brittle composure. "No problem at all." As Julian ascended the jet stairs, Vicky allowed her mind to flash back. The night he didn't come home. No call, no note. Just the deafening silence that settled over her, punctuated by the simultaneous, desperate cries of 5 hungry, demanding babies. The weeks of discovering his bank accounts were drained, his promises broken, the eviction notices stacking up, and the unpaid hospital bills for the premature Quince. She remembered the empty fridge, the cold despair, and the shame. She returned to the cockpit, taking her command seat with the posture that commanded respect, even from veteran pilots. "Take off in 3 minutes," she announced over the intercom, her voice perfectly modulated. It was exactly 5 years and 3 months ago that she had recommenced her flight training, a career Julian had mocked as unsuitable for his wife. The irony was a bitter cocktail she was now enjoying. 4 years ago, during advanced jet training, she met Ethan Vance. She hadn't recognized him as the discreet heir to the vast elite air holdings empire. To her, he was just a kind, encouraging instructor who saw her studying complex aeronautical manuals while simultaneously fielding calls from the daycare about her 5 little terrors. The jet began its powerful taxi, the engines a deep, predatory growl. Vicky felt perfectly in control of the aircraft, the situation, and her destiny. She was no longer the broken woman crying on the floor. She was the architect of her own resurgence. "Tower, Elite Air 447, ready for takeoff." The liftoff exhilarated her. It was a suspended moment between the ground and the sky, between the past and the future. Today, it was the first step of a meticulously plotted plan, conceived over months. The plan began to take shape a little over a year ago, when Ethan casually mentioned that Elite Air Holdings was finalizing the acquisition of a small corporate shuttle service, a service that primarily catered to that real estate mogul, Julian Thorne. Vicky's fork stopped midair. That night, as the Quince, Leo, Maya, Finn, Chloe, and Asher slept in their aviation-themed bedrooms, the couple had talked frankly. Ethan already knew the fragments of her history, but it was the first time Vicky revealed the raw details of the abandonment, the panic, the fear, and the final, crushing blow. Julian had vanished the day she told him that one of the babies, Finn, had shown signs of a serious respiratory condition that would require lifelong care. "He doesn't even know Finn nearly died when he was 3, she whispered, the tears finally escaping after years of suppression. "He doesn't know you found the specialist who saved our son. He doesn't know you are the one all 5 of them called Dad." Ethan held her hands. "He will know," he said simply, "when the time is right." The aircraft leveled at cruising altitude. Vicky engaged the autopilot. Through the surveillance mirror, she could see Julian pouring himself a whiskey, his eyes glued to the window as if contemplating a leap. Interactive question 1. Julian abandoned Vicky the moment things got tough. Do you think his fear in the turbulent flight was just about the storm? Or was it the sudden realization that his past was now literally in control of his life? Tell me your thoughts. Karma or coincidence? This was only the first of many scheduled flights on the contract Elite Air had locked Julian's companies into. A contract with cancellation clauses so punitive they would make a corporate lawyer weep. For the next 12 months, Julian Thorne would be, quite literally, in the hands of Victoria Sterling. Vicky observed his reflection in the control panel. What Julian didn't yet realize was that the airline empire of her current husband had systematically acquired strategic infrastructure surrounding Julian's newest, biggest real estate development in Colorado. Julian's entire future rested on approvals that, purely by coincidence, were in the hands of people intimately connected to Ethan. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about showing him that the children he abandoned were now the heirs to something far greater than he could ever build. That the problem he fled from, a son with special medical needs, was a brilliant, creative 8-year-old boy who dreamed of being a pilot just like his mom and dad, Ethan. If this story has you hooked, you have to share this with someone who needs a dose of good karma. Tag a friend right now, and don't forget to comment your theory on Julian's next move. Will he try to get her fired? A smooth flight later, the jet was on final approach. The landing was flawless. After completing the final checklist, Vicky prepared for the inevitable confrontation. She stepped out into the main cabin. Julian was standing, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Mr. Thorne, I trust the flight met your expectations, despite the adverse conditions," Vicky said, her voice flawless. "This is some kind of absurd coincidence?" he finally managed, his voice low. Vicky's smile was professional. "You don't believe in coincidences, remember? That was one of the first lessons you taught me." Before Julian could respond, his phone buzzed. An urgent business call. "Please feel free to disembark when you are ready," Vicky continued, her professionalism impeccable. "I will be piloting your return flight tomorrow at 5 p.m., as scheduled." The shock on his face was satisfying. "I will not board a plane you are piloting again." Vicky maintained her professional smile. "I'm afraid your company's contract with Elite Air is quite explicit. I am the designated captain for all your flights for the next 12 months. Any alteration would result in substantial contractual penalties. I believe such penalties could severely compromise the financing for your new Colorado venture." The color drained from Julian's face. How could she know about the Colorado project? That information was strictly confidential. "What do you want?" he asked. All pretense of composure gone, Vicky adjusted her captain's hat. "For now, just to do my job, Mr. Thorne. Have a pleasant stay in Denver." She turned and walked calmly off the jet. She knew exactly what he would do next. Call his legal team, discover the contract loophole was ironclad, and then, frustrated, begin to investigate Captain Victoria Sterling Vance. She texted Ethan. "Landing complete. Phase 1 secured." The reply was instantaneous. "Welcome back to the skies, my love. The kids are excited for the next chapter." Julian Thorne finally understood. By abandoning his family, he hadn't escaped a problem. He had created a force. He spent the night frantically digging, only to uncover the devastating truth. The 5 children he'd rejected, the Quints, were not only thriving, but were the stepchildren and eventual co-heirs of his most powerful corporate rival, Ethan Vance. His son, Finn, the one with the respiratory issues he'd fled, was now a happy, brilliant boy. The final act of reckoning came when Vicky, without a word, brought her husband and her 5 children, Leo, Maya, Finn, Chloe, and Asher, all dressed in miniature pilot uniforms, to the tarmac for Julian's return flight. Julian saw his reflection in Finn's dark eyes. He saw his own ambition, his own fear of weakness, mirrored in the child he abandoned. Vicky didn't need to say a word. The 5 beautiful, confident children, the successful career she had built, and the loving man standing beside her were her testimony. Julian's betrayal had been his own undoing, not through Vicky's malice, but through her sheer strength and resilience. She hadn't sought revenge. She had simply lived a life so successful that his abandonment became a footnote to her ultimate victory. The deepest meaning of this story is that sometimes the greatest form of victory isn't destroying your enemy, but simply outgrowing them. Vicky proved that your worth is not determined by the man who walks away, but by the empire of love and achievement you build in their absence. She was not the tragic ex-wife. She was Captain Sterling Vance, the one who didn't just survive the storm. She learned to pilot through it. What is the biggest life lesson you learned from a betrayal? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss our next story of ultimate justice. Fly safe, and remember, karma always reserves the window seat. Chapter 2. The Tarmac Confrontation. The Face of Consequence. Julian Thorne didn't sleep that night. His high-powered legal team confirmed his worst fears. The contract was ironclad. skillfully written by a firm known for their unbreakable clauses. His only recourse was to find a reason to fire the pilot, Victoria. But her flight record was flawless, her safety rating impeccable. He sat in his lavish Four Seasons Denver suite, a printout of the investigative dossier spread across the glass table. Subject: Victoria Sterling Vance, Captain, G650, Elite Air Holdings. Spouse: Ethan Vance, CEO of Elite Air Holdings. Net worth: $4 billion. Children: 5. Quintuplets: Leo, Maya, Finn, Chloe, and Asher, age 8. The photos accompanying the report hit him like a shockwave. 5 children, their faces bright, confident, and startlingly familiar, were smiling widely next to a man who was effortlessly embodying the role Julian had refused: a father. One image, in particular, showed little Finn, his eyes crinkling in a familiar way, wearing a small medical device disguised as a pilot's comms headset, a visible, undeniable reminder of the lifelong condition Julian had fled from. He was so engrossed in the dossier that he barely registered the sound of the sleek, black Elite Air Holdings van pulling up next to the jet at 4:30 p.m. the next day, 30 minutes before the scheduled return flight. Julian rushed out onto the tarmac, his composure already shattered. He was determined to confront Victoria alone, demand an explanation, anything that made sense. But as he approached the jet stairs, he saw her, Captain Sterling Vance, in her immaculate uniform, standing next to a tall, commanding figure he instantly recognized from the photos: Ethan Vance. Then the van door slid open, 5 small figures, perfectly coordinated in miniature, custom-made pilot flight suits, complete with tiny wings and personalized name tags, emerged. Leo, Maya, Finn, Chloe, and Asher, 8 years old, confident, curious. They didn't shuffle. They marched, holding hands, their 5 small faces turning in unison toward the strange man trembling on the tarmac. "My God," Julian whispered, the sound catching in his throat. The time froze. Julian Thorne, the ruthless real estate king, felt his knees buckle, not from a legal threat, but from the simple, overwhelming presence of the past he had tried to erase. "Who is that, Mom?" Chloe, the most vocal of the Quints, asked, her clear voice line slicing through the thick, tense silence. Victoria looked down at her children, her heart swelling with an almost painful pride. This was the moment of truth, a raw, unscripted scene she had decided on only an hour ago. She hadn't planned to introduce them so soon, but seeing Julian's pathetic desperation the night before, she knew the slow-burn approach was pointless. Some truths required a sudden, shocking exposure. She knelt down to their level, placing a hand on Finn's shoulder. "Remember when we talked about how sometimes people help bring a baby into the world, but they don't stay to be a parent?" Finn, the most sensitive and observant, stepped slightly forward, his dark eyes, Julian's eyes, studying the trembling man. "Is that the man from the old pictures, the one who left?" Victoria nodded, her gaze never leaving Finn's. "Yes, Finn. This is Julian Thorne." Leo, the most pragmatic of the 5, frowned. The man who didn't come back. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple, brutal statement of fact delivered without malice, yet devastating in its truth. Julian swallowed the dryness in his throat. You've all grown so much," he managed, his voice unrecognizable, even to himself. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Victoria interjected, her voice calm and firm. "You never checked." Interactive question 2. Julian claimed he didn't know. Do you believe this powerful, resourceful man genuinely couldn't track down his 5 children? Or was it simply more convenient to choose ignorance? How much responsibility do you place on Julian for choosing to remain absent? Let me know in the comments. "Why are we here, Dad?" Asher asked, turning to Ethan Vance, the word "Dad" hitting Julian like a physical punch. Ethan stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Asher's shoulder. Because sometimes, to move forward, we have to understand our history. And because your mother and I believe you have the right to know every part of who you are. Maya, the quietest, was staring at Julian with an unnerving intensity. "You look like Asher," she observed finally. The simple observation brought hot tears to Julian's eyes, tears he hadn't shed since he was a child. The resemblance was undeniable. "Mr. Thorne needs a moment," Victoria said calmly to the children. "Ethan, why don't you show them the new jet model in the hangar? I promised them a closer look at the cockpit." The children's eyes lit up instantly. The promise of exploring a real jet easily eclipsed the family drama they barely understood. "Can we touch the controls?" Finn asked, his interest in aviation palpable. "Under supervision only," Ethan smiled, leading the Quints toward the hangar. Before he left, he exchanged a silent, supportive glance with Victoria, a promise of solidarity. The final exchange. When the children were out of earshot, Victoria turned back to Julian, her composure steel-edged. "This wasn't in the plan," she began, her voice low. "But some truths need to be faced without choreography." "What is the opportunity for? Revenge?" Julian asked, a final flicker of his old arrogance returning. Victoria gave him a look of deep, weary recognition. 6 years ago, perhaps that's all I wanted. But now I have a career I love, a husband who respects me as an equal, and 5 wonderful children who know they are loved unconditionally. What could I possibly want from you?" Julian understood the silence that followed. He had expected demands for money, custody battles, or professional ruin. This apparent lack of malice, this calm, unshakable success, was a scenario he hadn't prepared for. "They look happy," he observed, the words heavy with relief and regret. "They are," Victoria confirmed, "and they are Ethan's, in every way that matters." "What do you want from me, then?" he asked finally, completely defeated. "Acknowledgement," Victoria replied without hesitation. "Legal and public. They deserve to carry your surname alongside ours, if they choose to, when they are old enough to decide. They deserve to know their full story, to know their biological roots." Julian blinked in confusion. "That's all?" Victoria gave him a small, sad smile. "It's not just all, Julian. It is everything. It is the truth. It is what you should have offered 8 years ago instead of disappearing." Julian looked towards the hangar, where Ethan was patiently showing the 5 Quints the controls of a maintenance jet. Leo was already giving orders. Finn was intently studying the gauge readings. "I will sign," Julian said, the weight of 6 years finally lifting from his shoulders. "Without condition, without delay." "The jet is ready for pre-flight inspection, Captain," Mark, the co-pilot, announced discreetly, approaching them. Victoria nodded. "Thank you, Mark. I'll begin the procedure in 15 minutes. She turned back to Julian. "Your return flight is confirmed for 5 p.m. You have until then to decide how you wish to proceed from here." With those words, Victoria walked toward the hangar, her posture radiating quiet power. She didn't look back. She knew exactly what he would do next. Sensory ending and meaningful conclusion. Julian Thorne signed the documents. Not for revenge, not for money, but because faced with the towering success of his ex-wife and the obvious, unconditional love surrounding his children, he realized his abandonment had been his ultimate, self-inflicted failure. On the return flight, Julian sat alone, watching his children through the rear-view camera feed. He saw Ethan reading a book to the Quints, their laughter faint but distinct. Vicky Sterling Vance hadn't needed to ruin Julian Thorne. By choosing resilience over bitterness, by finding love, and building a career that put her literally and figuratively above him, she had achieved a victory far more profound. The children he feared and fled from were now the heirs to an aviation empire. The problem he avoided was a brilliant, loved boy. The truest measure of a person is not what they destroy, but what they build from the wreckage. Victoria didn't just rebuild her life. She took to the sky and became the master of her own trajectory. The captain had won, not by fighting, but by flying. What do you think will happen when Julian eventually meets the Quints again? Will they accept him as part of their history? Comment your predictions below. And before you click away, subscribe for more unforgettable stories of triumph. Chapter 3. The Unraveling and the Unlikely Truce. The Silent Passenger. The Gulfstream G-60 sliced through the evening sky with surgical precision. Inside the cockpit, Victoria focused on the controls, the familiar routine a welcome buffer against the emotional earthquake she had just navigated. Mark, the co-pilot, didn't dare speak, sensing the deep personal tension that still permeated the air. Behind the closed cockpit door, Julian Thorne felt his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. He wasn't a powerful CEO anymore. He was just a passenger, completely reliant on the woman he betrayed. He watched the cabin camera feed on his monitor. Ethan Vance was sitting with the Quints, their heads bent together over a complicated aeronautical diagram. Finn, the most delicate of the boys, was nestled securely against Ethan's side. Julian saw the easy affection, the instant trust, the natural flow of love that defined their family unit. This wasn't a performance for his benefit. This was their normal. Julian's own breathing became shallow. He discreetly reached into his pocket for the inhaler he had used since his 20s, a mild, chronic respiratory issue he had always hidden, fearing any sign of weakness. The genetic predisposition. Vicky's words echoed back to him. He had fled from Finn's condition because it was a mirror reflecting his own carefully concealed frailty. He had promised Vicky he would sign the acknowledgement papers. But the moment of truth came when Ethan Vance quietly approached his seat, a man radiating calm authority that needed no shouting. "Mr. Thorne," Ethan began, his voice low and firm. "I need to set some parameters, man to man." Julian looked up, surprised by the direct approach. "You've won, Vance. The documents are signed. What more is there? This isn't a victory for me. It's closure for Victoria, and stability for the children," Ethan corrected, his gaze unwavering. "Those 5 kids are extraordinary. If you intend to be in their lives, even peripherally, you will be consistent. You will not disappear. I will not tolerate them being disappointed." Again, Julian felt the heat of shame rising to his face. The fierce, protective love in Ethan's eyes contained no threat, only a clear, unshakable boundary set by the man who had effortlessly assumed the responsibility Julian had abandoned. "I understand," Julian managed to say. They are your children. In every way that matters," Ethan confirmed. "You are their genetic history, and that is a fact we will not hide. But I am their father." The finality of the statement settled over Julian. He was not here to replace Ethan. He was here to fill a blank space in a legal document, and perhaps a historical footnote in his children's lives. Interactive question 3. Ethan Vance could have simply used his power to crush Julian professionally. Instead, he forced Julian to face his family and sign the acknowledgement. Which approach do you think is more powerful? Revenge through destruction, or redemption through forced accountability? The whispered truce. The jet began its smooth, gradual descent toward Boeing Field, Seattle. The Quints, veterans of their mother's career, immediately clipped their seatbelts without being asked. As the plane leveled for landing, Victoria engaged the intercom. "Passengers, we are on final approach to Boeing Field, Seattle. We expect a smooth landing." When the jet finally touched down, gliding onto the runway with Vicky's signature finesse, a strange sense of conclusion settled over the cabin. After completing the final checklist, Victoria opened the cockpit door and emerged. She walked straight to Julian, her uniform still immaculate, her expression controlled. "We are at the terminal, Mr. Thorne. I trust the flight was adequate." Julian stood up, a defeated, middle-aged man. "Victoria, thank you. For being honest. For raising them." "I didn't raise them for you, Julian," she stated plainly. "I raised them for them." He hesitated, then slowly approached the Quints, who were gathering their custom pilot backpacks. "It was very special meeting you all," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. I hope we can meet again, when you are ready." The Quints exchanged silent glances, that strange, non-verbal communication they had shared since birth. It was Finn, surprisingly, who took a small step forward. "Do you know about airplanes?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Julian blinked. "Planes?" "Yes," Finn continued, his dark eyes serious. "Everyone in our family knows about airplanes. If you want to visit, you have to learn." The simplicity of this condition, the implied depth of their world, left Julian speechless. It was Asher who broke the silence. "We can lend you some books," he offered, a small gesture of inclusion. "We have lots." Julian felt a fresh wave of emotion. This unexpected olive branch, this small allowance into their world, was more than he deserved. I would like that very much," he managed. A new flight plan. 3 months later, the Vance family private jet was flying over the Puget Sound. Victoria was once again at the controls, with Leo and Maya observing from the jump seats. In the main cabin, Ethan was helping Finn and Chloe with a complex navigation exercise, and sitting slightly apart, meticulously studying a textbook on basic aerodynamics. A gift from Finn, complete with sublinings and childish notes, was Julian Thorne. He was no longer a stranger, but not quite family either. A tolerated visitor in the world that could have been his. A man determined to pass the silent test set by his 8-year-old son. Victoria watched the scene briefly through the cabin mirror. What began as a confrontation had evolved into something more profound. Not forgiveness, but a complicated functional arrangement. Ethan came up to the cockpit, leaning in to kiss Victoria on the cheek. "Everything according to plan?" he asked softly. Victoria smiled, adjusting the aircraft's course slightly. "Not exactly according to plan," she replied, her voice steady. "Better than planned." Outside, the horizon stretched infinite and clear. Her future was built not on the wreckage of his betrayal, but on courage, unwavering dedication, and unconditional love. She had not only survived the turbulence, she had charted a new, victorious course. Julian now has to study aerodynamics to earn his place. What kind of relationship do you think he will eventually build with his 5 children? Do you think he can ever truly be forgiven? Tell me your final, deepest thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't just like, subscribe to the channel for more life-changing tales of Resilience Chapter 4. The Inevitable Collision. Julian's current life is starting to fracture. His current wife, Serena, a society woman who values image above all else, has discovered the truth. Not from him, but from the relentless whispered gossip of the Seattle elite. News of Julian's secret quints with the powerful Captain Sterling Vance has become a seismic society scandal. Serena is demanding he fight for full custody, believing the Thorne name cannot play second fiddle to the Vance empire. For the first time, Julian hesitated. He looked at the quints not as lost assets, but as real, complex, and intimidating people. The final, inescapable collision was orchestrated by Victoria at a neutral location, the exclusive hangar lounge at Boeing Field. Julian and Serena sat stiffly, waiting. Victoria arrived with Ethan, not in uniform, but in elegant casual wear, radiating an unshakable, bonded serenity. The air was ice cold. Serena, beautiful but brittle, spoke first. "We need to discuss this arrangement, Victoria. 5 children belong with their father, within the Thorne family structure. This setup is inappropriate." Victoria merely looked at her, then offered a slight, chillingly controlled smile. "Do they, Serena? They have never once asked about the Thorne family. They ask Ethan to help with math homework. They ask me about jet fuel. They call him Dad. What exactly is the suitable arrangement you propose for them?" Before Serena could launch her planned tirade, the children arrived, escorted by their nanny. They didn't run to Julian. They ran to Ethan and Victoria, seeking comfort and connection. Asher was visibly upset, clutching a crumbled drawing. "Mom! Dad!" Asher rushed forward. "Ms. Evans at school said my family drawing was wrong because I drew too many people and 2 dads." A profound silence fell over the lounge. Victoria knelt, pulling the distressed boy into a comforting hug. "My sweet Asher, our family drawing is perfectly right. Family is built on love, not just numbers." Then, Finn looked directly at Julian and Serena, his small face serious. "You're the people in the old picture, aren't you? The ones who said a family should only have 2 people and 1 baby." Julian froze. He realized Victoria wasn't playing a game of revenge. She was laying down the truth for her children. They knew who he was, a man who ran from their complexity. Victoria stood up, her gaze locking onto Julian. "Julian, you have a choice. You can fight, lose everything, and subject the children to a painful, public battle that only confirms what you've already been to them, a source of conflict. Or you can accept the truth. They do not need you to be Dad. They need you to be Julian, the person who tells them their history, the man who keeps his promise." Julian looked at Serena, her face a mask of cold fury. He looked at Finn, who was holding his respiratory device. He looked at Ethan, who gave a slight nod, a gesture of respect, not triumph. "I won't fight," Julian said, his voice finally clear, choosing peace over pride. "I accept this arrangement. I will be Julian. They are safe here. They are loved." Serena stormed out, dropping her wedding ring onto the polished wooden table. Julian didn't flinch. He walked over to Asher, who was still upset. "Asher," Julian said, kneeling down. "Your family drawing is beautiful, and your dad, Ethan, is right. Family is built on love. I can't be Dad, but I can be a storyteller about where you came from. Can I tell you a story about your grandfather and the tall buildings in Seattle?" Asher looked at him, then back at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. Asher slowly smiled. "Only if you can tell me what the aileron does." Julian smiled back, a genuine, relieved smile. "The aileron controls the banking of the plane. It changes the lift on the wing." The fight was over. The captain had landed the plane not in a crash, but in a complicated, functional piece. Julian has chosen truth and peace. Do you think his decision can earn him eventual redemption? Comment your thoughts on Julian's future right now. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next dramatic tale. You are absolutely right. My apologies for that oversight. I will strictly use English from this point forward. Here is Chapter 5, The Gift from Above, translated and continued as requested, maintaining the dramatic tone, length, and depth. Chapter 5, The Gift from Above. 5.1, The Weekly Aviation Interrogation. Julian now keeps a schedule far more rigorous than his former board meetings. Every Saturday, he arrives at the Vance Lakeside estate, complete with a private helipad, and must pass the weekly interrogation. This week's topic: avionics and backup instrumentation. Finn, the sensitive child who started it all, is now Julian's primary interrogator. "Julian," Finn asks, pointing to a diagram in the textbook, "why do modern planes need both EFIS and mechanical backup instruments? If a great pilot like Mom can trust digital screens, why carry all that heavy redundancy?" Julian takes a deep breath. This isn't just a child's question. This is a question about trust and preparedness. That's an excellent question, Finn, Julian replies, regaining his composure. EFIS, Electronic Flight Instrument System, is incredibly reliable. But in aviation, we always need redundancy. The mechanical backup is like a promise. I won't leave you. If the digital system fails, due to a lightning strike, electromagnetic interference, the backups are there, working independently without power. They remind the pilot that no matter what chaos hits, there's always a way home. Safety is certainty, not convenience. Asher and Chloe are instantly distracted by the lightning strike part, but Julian's gaze remains fixed on Finn. The boy nods, understanding. Julian didn't just explain the plane. He explained a life rule. 5.2. Victoria's vigilance. Victoria observes the scene from a safe distance. She's sitting on the terrace, enjoying a rare, quiet moment with Ethan, sipping tea. Did you see the way he looked at Finn? Victoria asks, her voice weary but not bitter. He saw himself in Finn's fear, and he's grasping for atonement. Ethan places his hand over hers, his gaze tender. You did the right thing, Vic. You didn't just hold him accountable. You gave him a chance to be a better man, a chance he's struggling to take. I didn't do it for him, Victoria insists. I did it because the children needed answers. They now have a storyteller for half their history, a man who is no longer a ghost. But I remain vigilant. Ethan smiles. And that's why you are the captain of this life. You are the safety officer, not the blind forgiver. Victoria nods, feeling profound gratitude for the man beside her. Ethan is her certainty, the one who built their family on a foundation of trust and respect, not on secrets. 5.3. The final gift. Later that afternoon, as Julian prepared to leave, he did not hand out expensive gifts as he did in his early, awkward visits. He gave each child a small, velvet-lined box. Leo, the naturally suspicious one, opened his. Inside was an intricately carved pilot's insignia, but not made of gold or silver. It was a dull, gray composite metal. What is this, Julian? Leo asks. Julian smiles, a look Victoria has never seen on him. It's slightly awkward, but deeply sincere. That is a piece of history. The insignia is made from a special composite material, specifically from fragments of an old propeller blade from a plane your biological grandfather flew as a service pilot. I had a jeweler reforge them. Finn holds his badge carefully. What does it mean? It means that broken pieces can still be made into something beautiful and strong, Julian says, his eyes meeting Victoria's for a fleeting second. It also means that even though I'm not a pilot, I'm part of this family's history, and I'm always here to help you learn those stories. Victoria and Ethan exchange a look. This gift was not a luxury item. It was a profound act of self-effacement. Julian had learned that in this world, value lay not in what he bought, but in what he acknowledged. Victoria walks up to Julian, offering her hand. She does not offer a hug, but a professional handshake. Thank you, Julian, she says. We'll see you next Saturday. Don't forget to study hydraulics. Julian nods, accepting his new homework. He walks out of the Vance home, no longer a defeated man, but one who has embarked on a long, arduous journey toward redemption. Julian is slowly building a bridge, but can he ever become an essential part of this family? What do you think his next major challenge will be? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe to continue following Captain Vance's journey. That was a powerful chapter. I'm happy to continue the story, focusing on Julian's next challenge, the inevitable emotional hurdle he must overcome to connect with the children beyond academics, and Victoria's final, quiet acknowledgement of his efforts. Here is Chapter 6, The Cost of Connection. The Cost of Connection. 6.1. The Ultimate Test. The emotional barrier. Julian's relationship with the children was solid, built on shared knowledge and intellectual respect. However, it was still a transactional bond, based on facts, not feelings. The Quints called him Julian, the storyteller, the airplane guy. He was not dad, nor even a true uncle. The real test came on a late Saturday afternoon, in a hangar belonging to Elite Air Holdings. Julian was patiently helping Leo assemble a complex drone kit, a transition from model planes to current aviation tech. Finn, often Julian's most insightful questioner, stood back, watching Julian's focused, professional movements. "Julian," Finn asked quietly, putting down his own wrench, "you know everything about why planes fly. But do you know about falling?" Julian paused, the small piece of plastic held delicately between his fingers. "Falling? You mean stall speed, loss of lift?" "No," Finn insisted, looking straight into Julian's eyes, a look that mirrored the one Julian had seen in the mirror 8 years ago. "I mean really falling, like when you're scared and you think someone is supposed to catch you, but they don't. How do you recover from that kind of falling?" Julian felt his controlled world shatter. This was not in any manual. This was the core question of his abandonment, delivered by the most vulnerable of the Quints. He set the drone piece down. He looked at Finn, then at the other Quints who had stopped playing to listen. He saw Victoria and Ethan watching from the lounge upstairs. "Finn, that is the hardest question," Julian began, his voice rough. "Planes have redundant systems to prevent a crash. People don't. When I left, when I fell, I made a promise to myself and others, to be safe, to be perfect. And when I couldn't be, I ran." He took a deep breath, forcing out the words he had hidden for a decade. "I let you all fall, and that was the greatest failure of my life. There is no manual to recover from that. You don't recover by learning facts. You recover by showing up, by staying grounded when the turbulence hits, even if you're terrified." He looked directly at Finn. "The way to recover from falling is to find the person who can look you in the eye and promise, 'I am here now. I can't undo the falling, but I can promise I will be here, grounded, for all of you. From now on." Finn walked up to Julian and, for the first time, hugged him, not with a child's tight embrace, but a brief, accepting shoulder bump. "Okay, Julian. Now, can we put the rotors on the drone?" 6.2. Victoria's quiet acknowledgement later as the sun set over the Seattle skyline, painting the hangar windows in hues of orange and gray. Victoria approached Julian as he packed his worn aeronautics books. "The way you answered Finn's question," Victoria said, her voice measured. "That wasn't in the textbook." Julian closed his bag. "I had to write that answer myself. Over the past year, I've realized that the most important thing I ran from wasn't them, but the imperfection in myself." Finn's question forced me to look at the wreckage. Victoria looked him up and down. The same man, yet completely transformed by humility and effort. She finally offered him the quiet, solemn acknowledgement he truly needed. "The kids are thriving, Julian. You are no longer a source of conflict for them. You are part of their history, and now, part of their present stability. Thank you for keeping your promise." "Thank Ethan," Julian responded, without a trace of resentment. "He showed me what a real father is. He gave me the space to learn what it means to be present." 6.3. The gift from above. The next day, Victoria and Ethan were preparing for a short family flight to the San Juans. As Victoria performed her pre-flight check, she found a small, custom-made leather-bound booklet taped to the yoke of the G650. Inside the booklet, in neat, technical handwriting, was a detailed, simplified guide titled "Emergency Protocol for Quints, a non-pilot's guide to Vance family stability." It wasn't a manual for the plane, but for the family. If Asher is quiet, his creativity is spiking. Give him paper, not a screen. If Finn coughs twice, check his inhaler. If Leo and Maya are fighting, give them a joint mission, like co-piloting a drone. On the final page, Julian had written, "Captain Vance, I learned that the best emergency protocol is not redundancy, but anticipation. The flight is safe, JT." Victoria felt a warmth spread through her. Julian had learned his lesson not just intellectually, but emotionally. He was grounded. She looked at Ethan, who was strapping Finn into his seat. "Let's fly, Captain," Ethan smiled. Victoria settled into her seat, the yoke feeling powerful and familiar in her hands. She had reclaimed her destiny, and in doing so, had unexpectedly given a lost man a path back to humanity. The plane taxied, the engines roared, and Captain Victoria Sterling Vance took her family, whole and secure, into the clear, pummel-open sky. Julian has completed his journey of accountability. What is the single most valuable lesson this story taught you about forgiveness and resilience? Share your thoughts below. And if this story resonated with you, show your support. Smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Of course, that was a satisfying conclusion. But if you want the story to continue, I can certainly deepen the narrative. The next chapter will focus on a crisis that tests Julian's new commitment and showcases the Vance Sterling family working as a seamless, powerful unit. Here is Chapter 7, Turbulence of Trust. Chapter 7, Turbulence of Trust. 7.1, The Unscheduled Flight. It's a chilly November evening. Victoria and Ethan are preparing for an urgent corporate flight to New York. Unexpectedly, one of the Quints, Asher, develops a sudden, severe allergic reaction, a sensitivity no one knew he had. His primary caregiver is unavailable, and Finn, Maya, Chloe, and Leo cannot be left alone. The decision is instantaneous. The whole family boards the G650. Asher needs to be rushed to a specialized medical center in New York, and the best available medical personnel are 2 hours away. Julian Thorne, who was supposed to be dropping off some vintage propeller blueprints, is the only other available adult. "Julian," Victoria orders, her voice sharp with necessity. "You're flying with us. You're the extra hands. I need you to focus only on keeping the other 4 calm. Ethan and I have the plane and Asher." Julian nods, his face pale but determined. "Understood. No questions. Just follow protocol." Victoria and Ethan take their seats in the cockpit. Ethan, though an owner, is also an accomplished pilot and acts as the first officer. Julian retreats to the main cabin, where the 4 relatively calm Quints watch with worried eyes as Asher struggles, his breathing heavy and rattling. 7.2, Crisis at Cruising Altitude. The flight is smooth until they hit the Great Lakes region. Victoria receives a sudden warning. Autopilot failure, electrical system anomaly. A localized issue is causing intermittent power surges. They're forced into manual control in moderate turbulence. In the back, Julian is reading a technical children's book to the 4 Quints, maintaining a facade of calm. But then Asher, already distressed, begins to panic, worsening his reaction. "Julian, Finn, Ethan!" Asher gasps. "I can't breathe. I'm scared." The other Quints immediately begin to panic. Finn rushes toward the cockpit door, crying, "Mom, what's wrong with the plane?" The air is thick with rising fear. Victoria, fighting the controls, can't leave her station. Ethan is stabilizing the aircraft. Julian snaps into action. He remembers the last lesson he prepared, emergency procedures for pressurization loss, which heavily relied on distraction and clear, calming instructions. He intercepts Finn, pulling him into a tight hug. "Finn, look at me. Your mom and Ethan are the best in the world. They need quiet. We have a mission right now. We are their backup team." He points to the ceiling, where the oxygen masks are securely stowed. "See those masks? Your mom trusts that they're there. We are her backup system. Mission 1. We need absolute silence. Mission 2. Maya and Chloe, you're the medical team. Get the water and the blanket for Asher. Mission 3. Leo, you're the communications officer. Tell me what color the cabin light is right now. By giving them specific technical roles, Julian diverts their panic into professional focus, the only language they truly trust. He then gently holds Asher, distracting him by describing the feel of the plane's movement, using the aerodynamic terms he'd been forced to learn. 7.3. The new redundancy. In the cockpit, Victoria and Ethan manage to stabilize the electrical system and regain partial autopilot control. They hear the children's voices, not panicked screams, but Julian's steady, calm commands, assigning roles and responsibilities. He's using the technical terms, Ethan murmurs, amazed. He's treating this like a flight mission. He's using anticipation, Victoria says, glancing at the yoke where Julian's small manual is taped. He knew what they needed before they needed it. They land safely in New York. Asher is rushed to the hospital and stabilized. Later that night, as the children sleep in the hotel suite, Victoria sits with Julian. The doctor said Asher's panic almost complicated the reaction. Victoria says softly, "Your quick thinking in the cabin, it helped save him, Julian. You became a vital part of the team." Julian looks down, exhausted. "I was terrified, but I remembered what I told Finn. I am here now. I couldn't run. I had to be the reliable redundancy." Victoria nods. She no longer sees the man who abandoned her. She sees the man who chose to step into chaos for their children. "Thank you, Julian," she says, extending her hand. Not in a professional handshake, but a gesture of mutual, earned respect. "You passed the test. You're not just the storyteller anymore. You're the flight engineer." The next morning, Julian doesn't fly back alone. He sits next to the Quints, reading them a story about a resilient little jet. His place in the complicated tapestry of the Sterling Vance Thorne family is permanently cemented, built not on blood or money, but on a shared moment of crisis and a promise kept at 35,000 feet. Julian proved his worth when it mattered most. What do you think this shared experience will mean for Julian's corporate life moving forward? Comment your thoughts on Julian's future career path. And, as always, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. The tension is high. I'm happy to continue the story, focusing on the aftermath of the crisis and how it influences Julian's professional and personal choices, leading to a new trajectory for the Thorne-Sterling Vance family. Here is Chapter 8, The New Trajectory. Chapter 8, The New Trajectory. 8.1. The Boardroom Decision. The incident profoundly affected Julian. He spent days beside Asher's bed in New York, then flew back to Seattle, his mind fixed not on real estate margins, but on aircraft redundancy systems and pediatric care protocols. Upon returning, he immediately convened a board meeting at Thorne Enterprises. His new focus was startling. "We are shifting our investment strategy," Julian announced to his bewildered board. "Effective immediately, we are divesting 50% of our residential real estate holdings. We are redirecting that capital into two key areas: specialized pediatric care infrastructure and aviation safety technology." His team, accustomed to predictable luxury developments, was stunned. "Mr. Thorne, with all due respect, pediatric care is not our sector, and aviation tech? That's Vance territory." Julian met their skepticism with a gaze hardened by recent events. "It is our sector now. My son, Asher, needed specialized care, and I learned firsthand the gaps in our system. And when an electrical surge can nearly ground a plane carrying my family, safety is paramount. We will not be competing with Elite Air. We will become a strategic partner." Julian realized that his true legacy wasn't the buildings he erected, but the stability he could provide. He was done running from responsibility. He would now engineer safety into his business empire. 8.2. The partnership. The decision led to an unprecedented meeting in the Elite Air Holdings conference room. Julian Thorne meeting with Victoria and Ethan Vance, not as rivals or former spouses, but as business partners. Ethan, Victoria, Julian began, laying out his proposal. I propose Thorne Enterprises funds and develops a state-of-the-art pediatric aeromedical transport unit, specialized jets designed for rapid, high-altitude transfer of critically ill children. Elite Air provides the operational expertise and flight crews. He looked directly at Victoria. The first jet will be named the Asher Finn Initiative. Furthermore, I propose co-funding a research program focused on predictive electrical system failure in long-range jets, a redundancy system that goes beyond current protocols. Victoria and Ethan listened, their initial skepticism melting into profound respect. This was not a business deal. It was Julian's apology, manifested in capital and commitment. Victoria broke the silence. The pediatric unit is a powerful commitment, Julian. It addresses a critical need. Ethan added, and the safety research is exactly where we need to be. We accept. This partnership will operate under a transparent, shared governance model, ensuring the children's well-being remains the central priority. The contract signed that day marked a true turning point. Julian Thorne was using his power to fix the systems that had once failed his family. 8.3. The new pilot in the family. 6 months later, the Asher Finn Initiative jet was unveiled. It was a marvel of aviation and medical engineering. During the dedication ceremony, Finn, now 9, stood next to the jet's landing gear, looking up at Julian. Julian, Finn asked, this is the best redundancy system ever, but what does it protect against? Julian knelt down, his hand resting on the smooth metal of the jet. It protects against uncertainty, Finn. It protects against the chance that someone might fall and no one is there to catch them. We built this to promise that no child will ever feel alone in a crisis. Finn nodded. Later, on a quiet family afternoon, Victoria gave Julian a gift, a personalized flight jacket with a small, embroidered patch. It wasn't the Elite Air logo, nor the Thorne logo. It was a unique crest, 5 interlocking circles representing the quints, surrounded by a subtle wing design. What is this? Julian asked, genuinely touched. It's the family crest, Victoria explained. And the patch is for you. You earned it, Julian. You are the flight engineer, the one who ensures the systems are robust and the crew is safe. Victoria, Ethan, and Julian stood together, watching the 5 children play a complicated game of tag around the pool. The family was a mosaic, built not on perfect pieces, but on strong, mended bonds. Victoria had not just won her life back. She had, through her resilience and demand for accountability, given the father of her children a new, purposeful trajectory. The story of Captain Vance's reckoning is complete. What part of Julian's transformation, from runner to flight engineer, was the most satisfying for you? Share your thoughts and final lessons in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of ultimate justice and incredible resilience. This is a great story, and I'm happy to write the next chapter, focusing on the future of Julian's new company and how the families navigate public perception and the Quint's growing awareness. Here is Chapter 9, The Public Gaze and the Private Code. Chapter 9, The Public Gaze and the Private Code. Line 1. The unveiling and the interview. The official unveiling of the first initiative jet in Seattle was a major media event. Victoria, in uniform, stood beside Ethan and Julian, presenting a united, if unconventional, front. A sharp reporter, known for sensationalism, cornered Julian. "Mr. Thorne, this is an impressive philanthropic pivot. But let's be honest, is this massive donation merely hush money to apologize to your ex-wife and children for abandoning them?" The crowd went silent. Julian, the former master of corporate arrogance, paused. He looked toward the Quints, who were nervously watching from the viewing area with their nanny. "That's a fair, if cynical, question," Julian replied, his voice calm and resonant, a tone he'd learned from spending time in the cockpit. "The past cannot be bought, and it certainly can't be covered up. I did make a terrible mistake. I prioritize fear over responsibility," he continued, looking directly into the camera. "The Asher Finn initiative is not an apology to my ex-wife, Captain Vance. It is a commitment to my sons and daughters. It is my promise to them, and to every child, that when they are facing a crisis, they will have the best engineered chance for safety. I am not trying to buy my way back into their lives. I am simply using my resources to fix the problem I fled from, a lack of certainty in a chaotic moment. I am the flight engineer now, and my job is redundancy, not remorse." His sincerity, coupled with his willingness to use his own past as a lesson, completely disarmed the press. The narrative instantly shifted from scandal to redemption. 9.2. The private code. The Quints, now 10, watched the entire exchange on a tablet. They understood the gravity of the moment. Later that day, Maya, the quiet observer, approached Victoria as she was packing for a short flight. "Mom," Maya asked, "is Julian still part of the family, even though he's not Dad?" Victoria knelt down, meeting her daughter's intelligent gaze. "Family isn't just about who flies the plane, Maya. It's about who helps engineer the safest flight path. Julian is a partner in our stability. He's the one who provides the extra safety checks, the extra systems. He is the redundancy. He's part of our private code." Victoria pulled out a small framed photo that sat on her desk. It was a blueprint, a technical drawing of a perfect circle with 5 smaller, interlocking circles inside, labeled simply, "Redundancy." The Vance Sterling Protocol. "He chose to become the strongest, most reliable version of himself for you," Victoria finished. "And that earns him a place in our flight path." 9.3. The inheritance of integrity. The real test came a month later when Julian's lawyer presented him with the final documents establishing the Quints trusts. Julian, now completely focused on legacy, made a surprising change. He called Victoria and Ethan. "I am changing the structure of my primary corporate will. I want Finn, as the first child, to show me what true vulnerability and strength are, to inherit the majority of the non-liquid assets, the property, the land, the holdings." Victoria was cautious. "Julian, that's incredibly generous, but Finn is still young, and the other Quints." Julian smiled gently. "My ambition nearly destroyed me. I don't want to burden them with a traditional aggressive real estate empire. But Finn's sensitivity, his focus on systemic needs, that's what Thorne Enterprises needs to become. He doesn't need to compete. He needs to ensure the stability I failed to provide. And the others, Leo, Maya, Chloe, and Asher, will inherit the majority of the liquid assets and the Aero Medical Initiative shares, ensuring they guide its mission." Ethan nodded, understanding the wisdom behind the unusual distribution. Julian was handing down not wealth, but purpose, tailored to each child's character. Victoria looked at Julian, seeing a man whose soul had been completely recalibrated. He was using his power to build something of true, lasting value. She had not only survived the crash, she had engineered a landing that ensured the safety and moral prosperity of both her children and the man who was once their greatest threat. Julian has ensured his legacy is one of purpose, not just profit. What do you think the Quints will do with the Aero Medical Initiative when they grow up? Share your visions for their future in the comments. and please show your support for this story of ultimate resilience. Smash that like button and subscribe. This story is incredible. I'm happy to write the final chapter, wrapping up the Quint's journey into adulthood and solidifying Victoria and Ethan's legacy. Here is Chapter 10, the final chapter. Full Circle, the Captain's Legacy. Chapter 10, Full Circle, the Captain's Legacy. 10.1. The Quints take flight. The 5 Vance Sterling Thorne siblings, unified by their unique childhood, now lead the family enterprises. Finn, true to his nature, manages the vast Thorne real estate holdings, transforming the company from commercial development into sustainable, energy-independent urban planning. His focus is on redundancy in infrastructure, ensuring communities are built to withstand crisis, a direct reflection of his early life lessons. Asher, Maya, Chloe, and Leo co-direct the Aero Medical Initiative. Asher, the one who sparked the endeavor, is the CEO, ensuring the human mission remains central. Maya and Chloe, with their sharp organizational skills, manage logistics and funding. Leo, the most tech-savvy, runs the advanced flight safety research, directly incorporating the predictive failure models Julian funded. Their combined success is a testament to Victoria and Ethan's philosophy. Family is built on shared purpose. 10.2. The final test of trust. On the eve of her 60th birthday, Victoria decides to retire from active piloting. She invites Julian, Ethan, and Olive Quince to the original Gulfstream G-Coach, the jet that started it all, now fully retrofitted and maintained. Julian, now a respected philanthropist, and Papa Julian, to the Quints' own children, sits in the back, no longer the terrified passenger, but a peaceful elder statesman. In the cockpit, Victoria sits in the captain's chair for the last time. Her first officer for this final flight is none other than Leo, a certified pilot with elite air. "Clear for takeoff, Captain," Leo confirms, his voice stone steady. As they climb to cruising altitude, Victoria turns to Leo. "It's your airspace now, Lieutenant. Take the controls." Leo skillfully takes command. The flight is smooth, but halfway through, Leo issues a quiet command. "Captain, I'm detecting a slight pressure anomaly in the forward avionics bay. It's minimal, but unexpected." Victoria sees the trace of concern in his eyes. This is not a simulation. This is real. "What's your protocol, Lieutenant?" Victoria asks, testing his judgment one final time. Leo calmly assesses the data, recalling the very lessons Julian had forced himself to learn. It's below critical threshold, but unnecessary risk. "We initiate the Sterling Thorne safety protocol, divert 15 degrees, maintain current altitude, and notify ground maintenance for diagnostics upon landing. We prioritize certainty." Victoria smiles, a deep, satisfied smile. He used the family's own safety code. "Protocol approved, Lieutenant. Fly us home." 10.3. The Captain's Legacy. As they land, the Quints and their families are waiting on the tarmac. Julian embraces his grandchildren, the picture of a proud patriarch. Victoria steps off the jet, no longer a pilot, but the matriarch of an extraordinary family. Ethan walks up to her, holding her hand. "You had a perfect career, Vic. Flawless final landing." "It was never just about the landing, Ethan," Victoria says, looking at her 5 children, thriving professionals, standing shoulder to shoulder with Julian. "It was about proving that even when the storm hits, and you are left with nothing, you can engineer a life of certainty, built on integrity and unbreakable trust." Victoria Sterling. Vance's legacy wasn't just in the sky, but on the ground. She showed the world that resilience isn't just surviving a crisis. It's using that crisis to build a better, stronger, more accountable system for everyone. What part of Captain Vance's life story will you carry with you? The initial resilience, the mid-air reckoning, or the final legacy? Share your favorite lesson in the comments. Thank you for following the extraordinary journey of Captain Victoria Sterling Vance. Smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. You love this story. I am thrilled to give you one final emotional epilogue that focuses on Julian's final thoughts on the day of Victoria's retirement and the enduring strength of the chosen family. Here is the epilogue, the view from the ground. 1. The quiet observer, on the tarmac of the Elite. Air Private Terminal. Julian Thorne, now 70, stood a little apart from the celebrating crowd. He watched the G650, piloted by his son Leo, carry Victoria on her last professional flight. He wasn't needed for the family photo. Ethan and Victoria stood at the center, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, a perfect, unwelcome circle. Julian was content to be the quiet observer, the flight engineer who completed the complex system. Julian had lived a life of ultimate accountability. He had divorced Serena and channeled his immense focus into the Aero Medical Initiative. His Thorne Foundation now funded scholarships for single mothers pursuing aviation careers, a silent tribute to the woman who had rebuilt her life from the ground up. 2. The final acknowledgement. As the jet reached cruising altitude, Julian felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Ethan Vance, his former rival, now his most profound ally. "She made it," Ethan said simply, looking up at the disappearing speck of the jet. 20 years of flawless flying after she could have crashed and burned. "She was never going to crash," Julian replied, a touch of pride in his voice. "She understood redundancy better than any of us. She built a life with multiple systems. Her career, the children's bond." Ethan smiled. "I want to thank you, Julian, not for the money or the partnerships, but for becoming the anchor she needed to prove her point. Your presence today, your commitment, that's the final piece of her legacy. It showed the kids that even the biggest failures can lead to the strongest foundations." Julian looked at Ethan, the man who had effortlessly assumed the title he had run from. "No. Thank you, Ethan. You taught me the most crucial lesson in engineering. The greatest form of power is not what you control, but what you protect. You protected them, and in doing so, you saved me." 3. The view from the ground. Later, as the sun began to set, Julian was approached by his grandson, Asher Jr., named after his father, the C of the initiative. "Papa Julian," the 5-year-old asked, looking up at the sky. "Was Grandma Vicky the best pilot in the world?" Julian knelt down, looking at the boy's innocent, bright eyes. "No, Asher," Julian said softly. "Your Grandma Vicky wasn't just the best pilot. She was the best captain. A pilot focuses on the controls. A captain focuses on the crew, the mission, and the destination. She didn't just fly the plane. She led us all to a better place." Julian watched his family, his true chosen family, celebrate Victoria's retirement. He realized the most perfect view was not from 35,000 feet, but from the ground, watching the beautiful, complex, and safe world they had all built together. The reckoning was completely complete mouth. The captain's legacy was secure. The end. Thank you so much for reading and continuing this amazing story. If you'd like to read another dramatic, inspiring tale, just let me know.